Welcome to the deep dive. Today we have a stack of source material that centers entirely around this concept called soul mommy.
Yeah, which is quite the title.
Right. I'll be completely honest with you. When I first saw that in our notes, I thought we were getting into like some fleeting internet culture meme.
Oh, absolutely.
It sounds like a viral hashtag you'd see on a 30-second video or something. But the moment you start actually reading through this text, you realize it's far from a joke.
It really is.
It's a profoundly deep, surprisingly challenging psychological and spiritual framework. It is fundamentally about how, yes, you listening to this right now are navigating the entire trajectory of your life.
It's a striking piece of writing,
Hmm.
and I think it's important to establish right away that despite the somewhat playful, highly modern name, the source material makes it abundantly clear that this is not about magical thinking.
No, definitely.
This isn't a manifestation guide. It's
Right.
not about visualizing a guru or a savior to come and rescue you from your problem.
Right. Nobody's coming to save you.
Exactly. The core mission of the text we're analyzing today is about mapping a very specific, practical journey, moving away from a life dictated by external validation and emotional chaos, and arriving at a state of what the text calls integrated self-leadership.
Integrated self-leadership.
Yes. Ultimately, it's a blueprint for how you become the regulated, calm center of your own life.
Exactly. The text creates this incredibly sharp contrast between living on these chaotic, highly dramatic life trajectories versus shifting onto what it calls the only good timeline.
The only good timeline.
Yeah. And the mission of our deep dive today is to walk you through how that shift practically happens. How do you go from that high drama, exhausting, burnout existence to a place of true internal safety? Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it. And the best place to start is with the most crucial revelation the text offers right out of the gate. It redefines what this whole archetype even is, which completely subverts expectations.
Right, because the text says, in no uncertain terms, soul mommy is not a person.
Not a person at all.
When I read that, it kind of stopped me in my tracks. I think I assumed it was going to describe some idealized fantasy figure, a perfect partner, a flawless mentor, or some maternal superhero you need to go out and find in the world to make everything better. But the text immediately dispels that fantasy.
Precisely. The text defines her instead as a state of integrated self-leadership. It's an internal posture. It's not someone you meet. It's a framework you embody.
A framework you embody, I like that.
And the source material highlights some very specific foundational qualities that make up this state. It mentions inner safety, regulated power, self-nurturing authority, mature emotional containment, protective clarity, and sovereign love.
That is quite a list.
Notice how all of those terms, regulated, self-nurturing, contained, internal, they all point directly back to the individual's own nervous system. It's not about drawing power or comfort from the outside. It's about generating it from within.
Those are dense phrases, though. Let's translate some of this for the listener. For instance, the text mentions mature emotional containment.
Yes, that's a big one.
For someone listening while driving to work or walking your dog, what does that actually look like in real time? I hear containment, and part of me just thinks of suppressing your feelings. Is that what the text means?
Not at all, and that's a vital distinction. Suppression is shoving the emotion down and pretending it doesn't exist.
Mm.
Mature emotional containment, as outlined in the framework of this text, means you have the capacity to feel a massive emotion.
Like a sudden burst of anger.
Exactly, like sudden anger, deep sadness, or intense anxiety. You feel it, and you hold it within yourself without letting it immediately drive your actions. You contain it like water in a strong glass.
So you don't just react instantly.
Right. You see it, you feel it, but you don't instantly spill it all over everyone else by lashing out, sending a frantic text message, or collapsing into victimhood. You hold it until you can process it.
That makes a lot of sense. You feel the feeling, but the feeling isn't holding the steering wheel. That brings us to the other big concept introduced right at the beginning of the text, the only good timeline. Now, when people hear the word timeline, it's easy to think of sci-fi movies or the idea that everything is predetermined and we have no free will. But the text explicitly clarifies that the only good timeline does not mean your fate is fixed.
What's fascinating here is how the text defines that phrase. It states that the only good timeline simply means there's only one trajectory that produces coherence.
Coherence.
Yes, it's about alignment, not predestination. Coherence means everything is working together harmoniously. Your thoughts, your actions, your core values, your relationships.
All line up.
When the text talks about timelines, it's really talking about behavioral and psychological pathways. There are infinite pathways you could walk down, but only the one rooted in this integrated self-leadership actually holds together over the long haul. Everything else eventually collapses under the weight of its own drama.
Which perfectly sets up the contrast.
Oh.
If there's only one trajectory of coherence, what are all the other timelines built on? The text doesn't hold back here.
No, it really doesn't.
It lists the foundations of these alternative, chaotic timelines as abandonment of self, dysregulated attachment, fear-based decision-making, identity confusion, and emotional chaos.
Those are heavy, destabilizing foundations. And what the text illustrates is how they trigger a chain reaction. When you abandon yourself,
Meaning what?
I
Exactly.
mean, you ignore your own needs, your own intuition, or your own boundaries to please someone else or keep the peace. When you do that, you instantly step into dysregulated attachment. Your sense of safety is no longer internal. It is now entirely tied to how someone else is behaving.
Right, you've outsourced it.
Exactly. If they're happy with you, you feel safe. If they pull away, you panic. And that naturally leads to fear-based decision-making.
Let's ground dysregulated attachment in a real-world scenario. Is that like, say, pretending to absolutely love a miserable, freezing 6-mile hiking date just because you desperately want the person you're with to text you back the next day?
That is a brilliant example.
You completely abandon your own comfort and preference because your attachment to their approval is running the show.
That is the perfect everyday example. You are abandoning your actual self, the self that hates freezing and hiking, to perform a version of yourself that you hope will secure the attachment. And the text describes exactly how these chaotic timelines actually feel to live through.
They feel terrible, usually.
They feel highly dramatic, they spike high and crash low, they create obsession, fantasy, and what psychologists call projection.
Let's pause on projection because the text mentions that as a key feature of the chaotic timeline. What are we projecting in these scenarios?
In a chaotic timeline, because you aren't anchored in yourself, you project your own unmet needs and fantasies onto other people. You meet someone, and instead of seeing who they actually are, you project the role of savior or soulmate onto them.
So you're not even interacting with the real person.
No, you project your own desire for safety onto a situation that might actually be incredibly unsafe or unstable. You are essentially watching a movie playing in your own mind rather than interacting with the reality in front of you.
And that roller coaster feeling the text leans into this heavily. You think you're living in a grand, sweeping romance or an incredibly passionate life, but you're actually just on a terrifying ride, totally at the mercy of the tracks.
The text dives deeply into the why of this experience. It notes that in these chaotic timelines, we constantly feel urgency, a deep fear of loss, and emotional instability. But here is the profound insight the text offers. When we are in that state, our nervous system is so out of whack that we make massive interpretive errors about reality.
Interpretive error.
Yes, we mistakenly believe that, as the text puts it, attention is proof of worth. And even more dangerously, it states that intensity is mistaken for intimacy.
Intensity is mistaken for intimacy. That might be the most challenging line in the whole source
It's
text.
definitely one of those confronting.
But wait, how do we tell the difference? If my heart is racing because I really like someone, or I'm super excited about a new job, versus my heart racing because my nervous system is in a panic and I'm on a chaotic timeline, how does the text suggest we separate those two? Because they both just feel like a pounding heart.
It's a crucial question. The difference lies in the underlying texture of the feeling, and the text clarifies this by focusing on safety. True intimacy, according to this framework, is grounding. It might be exciting, but it doesn't make you feel frantic or desperate.
Okay, so what about intensity?
Intensity, on the other hand, is fueled by anxiety. It's the desperate high of finally getting a text back after 3 days of silence, or the adrenaline rush of a massive argument followed by a tearful makeup.
The spikes and crashes.
Exactly. We think, I feel so anxious, I can't eat, I can't sleep, I must really love this person. But the text is telling us, no, that's not connection. That is just your nervous system in a state of alarm, because you are on a timeline built on the abandonment of yourself.
Wow. I can see people listening to this right now reevaluating entire decades of their lives. How many times have we called a situation passionate when it was really just emotionally unstable?
More times than most of us would like to admit.
So if we know what the roller coaster looks like, the spikes, the crashes, the begging, the performing, how do we actually get off the ride? What does the soul mommy timeline look like in action?
The text highlights a very clear behavioral shift. It
Yeah.
says, when you step onto this timeline, you do not chase, you do not beg, you do not collapse, you do not perform for validation. Instead, the operative word the text uses is that you anchor.
I love that word, anchoring. Here's where it gets really interesting,
Hmm.
because the text outlines the internal paradoxes of what this anchored state actually looks like in practice. I want to read this directly from the source because it beautifully articulates the balance we are supposed to strike.
Please do.
It says the Soul Mommy timeline includes boundaries without apology, softness without collapse, confidence without arrogance, and receptivity without desperation.
Those four pairings are brilliant because they systematically dismantle the false dichotomies we usually live with. Let's look at them. We often think that to have boundaries, we have to be aggressive, mean, or highly defensive. But the text says you can have boundaries without apology.
Meaning what? Just a simple no?
Exactly. It's a matter of fact, it's saying, I can't take on that project, or I won't be spoken to that way without launching into a 20-minute justification about how sorry you are. It's just a boundary.
And what about the second one? Softness without collapse.
We often think that being soft or empathetic means being a doormat, but the text argues you can be open-hearted, tender, and empathetic to a friend's crisis without taking on their panic and losing your own structural integrity.
So you can be there for them without becoming them.
Exactly.
And confidence without arrogance.
Arrogance is an external performance. It's trying to prove you are better than someone else. Confidence, in this integrated state, is an internal knowing. You know your worth, so you don't have to talk over people in a meeting to prove you belong there.
Which flows right into receptivity without desperation, being open to love or to new opportunities without feeling like you will literally die if they don't work out. You go on a date observing if you actually like them, rather than just desperately hoping they like you.
Exactly. When you embody those four paradoxes, you fundamentally change how you interact with the world. And the text explains that this state naturally creates a filtering mechanism. It says that when this integrated self leads, your outcomes shift, and you naturally filter out chaotic dynamics, manipulative behavior, and inconsistent energy.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this filtering process seems incredibly potent. But the text specifically notes a distinction here. You do not filter these things out through control. You filter them through standard.
That is a crucial distinction.
I can see people struggling with it, though.
Whoa.
Where is the line between having a high standard and just being rigidly controlling about who you let into your life?
It's a very fine line, but a vital one. Control requires the other person to change. Control is external. It's demanding that someone text you back within an hour or trying to manipulate a situation so you never feel insecure. It's trying to manage someone else's behavior so your anxiety goes away.
Which is exhausting.
Exhausting and, frankly, impossible. Standard, on the other hand, is internal. It is the simple, unwavering knowledge of what you will and will not allow into your own life.
So standard is about your own behavior, not theirs.
Correct. As the source material notes, Soul Mommy does not dominate others. She stabilizes herself first. When your standard is clear, you don't have to fight manipulative behavior or beg an inconsistent person to be consistent. You just don't engage with it.
You just walk away.
Yes. If someone is playing games, your standard dictates that you step back. The chaotic dynamics naturally bounce off you because there is nothing in you that resonates with them or feeds them. You aren't trying to control the waves. You are just anchoring your own ship.
You just don't buy a ticket to the roller coaster anymore. You let it run its course without you. And the text gives really practical, almost biological steps for maintaining this internal standard. It says this is the timeline where you actively protect your nervous system. You do not override your intuition. You choose long-term coherence over short-term stimulation. And crucially, you self-soothe instead of demanding rescue.
That phrase, choosing long-term coherence over short-term stimulation, is arguably the biggest hurdle for people transitioning out of those chaotic timelines.
Because short-term stimulation feels so good in the moment.
Exactly. Short-term stimulation is the dopamine hit of getting a text from the toxic but exciting ex. It's the drama of a blowout fight and the intense makeup afterward. It gives you a chemical rush. But long-term coherence is the commitment to a life that actually makes sense day in and day out.
And the self-soothing part.
The text mentions self-soothing in direct opposition to demanding rescue. In a chaotic timeline, when you feel anxious, you demand rescue. You fire off 10 text messages demanding reassurance. In the integrated timeline, self-soothing means you pause. You breathe. You validate your own feelings before you act. You hold yourself with firmness and care.
Which brings up a really challenging reflection for you, the listener, right now. The text points out that the only good timeline is the one where your behavior matches your highest values consistently, not occasionally, consistently. Are your actions lining up with what you actually value every single day, or are you just visiting your values on the weekends when the drama dies down?
It's a tough question to ask yourself.
Are you anchoring, or are you chasing short-term stimulation?
It requires a profound level of self-honesty to answer that. And it also requires accepting what the text calls the quietness of this timeline. This is a fascinating observation from the source material. It states explicitly, the Soul Mommy timeline is quiet, stable. It is not flashy. It is secure.
And I think that's where a lot of people might trip up, because if you are used to the fireworks and the extreme highs and lows of emotional chaos, peace can feel really jarring at first, can't it? Doesn't healthy stability almost feel like boredom if you're fresh off the roller coaster?
Yes, absolutely. It
But
feels like withdrawal. When you are conditioned to believe that love is earned by suffering, which is a major cultural narrative the text critiques, then a love or a life that doesn't require suffering feels somehow invalid.
if you aren't fighting for it, is it even real?
Exactly. If you aren't fighting for it tooth and nail, your brain wonders if it matters. The text is trying to recondition us. It wants us to understand that true power is internal, and true security doesn't need to put on a show. She does not need to overpower anyone. She does not need to prove anything to the room. She just knows. In this timeline, you feel grounded, steady, internally validated, and emotionally contained.
So what does this all mean? We've traced the journey from the chaos of abandoning ourselves through the spikes and crashes of dysregulated attachment. We've explored what it means to drop the anchor, to hold boundaries without apology, and to rely on our internal standard rather than trying to control the world around us. When we pull all of these concepts together, what is the ultimate takeaway for the person listening who wants to step onto this coherent timeline today?
The ultimate takeaway from the text is a call to end the cycle of self-betrayal. It means recognizing that the only good timeline is the one where you finally stop abandoning yourself. You stop outsourcing your authority, your worth, and your emotional regulation to the unpredictable opinions, moods, and actions of others.
You take it all back.
You take it back. You realize that Soul Mommy isn't a fantasy figure coming down from the clouds to save you. She is the integration of your own highest, most mature self. And here is the true promise of the text. When you allow that integrated self to lead, you don't have to force the world to change. You don't have to wrestle reality into submission. The timeline naturally reorganizes around your coherence, because ultimately, a life built on coherence is the only timeline that sustains. Everything else will eventually burn itself out.
That is incredibly empowering, to realize that you don't have to fix the whole world and you don't have to control everyone in your life. You just have to stop abandoning yourself, and the timeline will naturally reorganize around you. Thank you to everyone listening for taking this deep dive with us today. We've gone from examining the high drama, exhausting spikes of dysregulation to uncovering the quiet, secure, and self-nurturing authority of true integrated self-leadership. It's a powerful reminder that true intimacy isn't intensity, and true power doesn't need to be proven.
This raises an important question, one that I think every listener should mull over long after this deep dive ends. If we have spent our entire lives conditioned by these chaotic timelines, if we have fundamentally believed that love must be earned through suffering, and that dramatic intensity is the only proof of intimacy, how much of our old identity are we going to have to grease? How much of our old definition of excitement will we have to actively let go of when we finally step into the quiet, unflashy peace of true coherence? Will we at first mistake that healthy, quiet stability for boredom before we finally realize it is the only timeline that actually sustains us?
A brilliant and challenging thought to leave off on. Letting go of the chaos and the familiar roller coaster might just be the hardest and undoubtedly the most rewarding work you ever do. Thank you for exploring these sources with us today. Keep seeking that coherence, keep cultivating your internal safety, and we will catch you on the next deep dive. Take care.